Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Hospitable Hosts podcast. Today we are speaking with Robert and Nicole from Wandermore Hosting and learning about their journey co-hosting 19 properties across the US. We'll find out a bit more about their tech stack and how they decide which property owners they are going to work with. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like and share. Thanks. Okay, awesome. Hello, Robert and Nicole. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Great.
Doing good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on and joining us for this podcast episode.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
No worries. So, Robert, Nicole, maybe you can do a bit of an introduction to yourselves and your business to get us started.
Yeah. You want to start or you want me to start?
You can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So we are a co-hosting property management company based in Orlando, Florida. We manage properties throughout a few different markets. Florida, of course, because we live here, Tennessee, Georgia, and then, believe it or not, all the way in Oregon, all the way on the West Coast. So we're kind of all over the place. But got started, as a lot of people do in this industry, purchasing our own property and turning it into a short-term rental. And, decided that we liked it enough to want to do this for other people and kind of help them, get started and, get their properties up to where they needed to be, producing and hitting their goals. So that's kind of the short and sweet intro of what we do. We manage a number of properties, close to 20 properties right now. I think we're at 19. So, yeah.
Nice. And is it just the two of you, or is there more people helping out with the business?
Yeah, we have one assistant that works for us doing guest messaging, but recently hired her about a couple months ago. So in the beginning, it's just been Robert and I.
Yeah. Nice. Obviously, as you're growing more properties, just feeling that need to get a little bit of extra support, I guess. Yeah.
Yes,
Definitely.
definitely.
Nice. And how are you finding that, challenge of, managing remotely? Different states, especially, different part of the country completely with Oregon. How do you manage to kind of, balance that and make sure that you're doing a good job nearby and, across the US?
Yeah, so the way we look at it is it's really not much different than having a property that's even like 45 minutes or 30 minutes away, right? If you have the right cleaning team and the right, maintenance staff, the right, we'll just say feet on the ground, the people that can actually go to the property and help when you need it, I think you can really manage, properties from anywhere. Hospitable obviously helps us a ridiculous amount with that. But yeah, I guess the one thing that kind of sticks out to me with that is just like having the right team in place when you have a property, at a distance. I don't know if there's anything else you would add there.
Good communication with obviously our cleaning teams, making sure we really catch things that guests annotate in their comments, their reviews and things like that. And making sure we relay that feedback back to our cleaners, having them double check things, and then getting out maintenance or handyman if it's something more extensive. And then also, sometimes relaying that communication back to the owners for property improvements and things like that. So, our business really relies around great communication in all aspects.
Totally.
That's awesome. And obviously, can't fault me for this, but we've got to plug Hospitable there. Obviously, that's we were built out of communication, guest communication specifically. Can you maybe talk about how that has helped you to grow?
Yeah. Guest communication is kind of the lifeblood of what we do here, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have good guest communication, you're not going to have good reviews and the properties are going to suffer. I think, Miles, just, thousands and thousands of Airbnb properties. And it's surprising to see how some of them are just kind of thrown up and, really not managed and just kind of left to do their own. But Hospitable has absolutely helped with streamlining the guest booking journey from, confirmed booking all the way to checkout. And then, of course, even the AI platform that you guys have now has been a game changer for us. We're not using AI for every response, obviously. We want kind of a personal kind of response to, some of the questions that come in. But, having the ability to, when somebody asks where a certain location is from a property. We can now not have to go, hunt that down, and managing remotely. We may get a question about somewhere we haven't heard about in Oregon, right? So we can hit the AI button, and that'll typically pick up, hey, it's 15 minutes away from the property. So, guest communication and with Hospitable's guest communication has completely helped us, make sure guests are happy, and we maintain those high review scores for sure.
Yeah, and definitely with the improvements that Hospitable is constantly making, a specific instance is, say a guest is having an issue with a specific item, Hospitable kind of pins it that this guest has pinpointed an issue. And then every time we respond, it's kind of there. So we're taking extra care to, make sure that our responses are specific to that need and trying to make sure that guest is comfortable. So that really, because we have 19 properties, we're communicating with so many different guests. It's hard to remember, hey, this guest had a little bit of a rough start. Let's try to pay a little more attention. But with that, it really helps to put it in the forefront of our communication to them. So that's been a great help.
Definitely.
Nice. That's awesome to hear. And are there other tools that you're using in your business kind of helping you to kind of, streamline everything and keep an eye on all those 19 properties?
Yeah. Can we plug other companies?
You can go ahead and be open and transparent. Do you know we're Hospitable? We're super transparent. Come on.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. Breezeway. We use Breezeway for cleaning and kind of maintenance and stuff. I know they have an integration with you guys. That has helped a ton. Maintenance obviously is its own animal. Obviously guest communication's got to be on, and cleanliness has got to be good. But if the properties aren't well maintained and issues aren't taken care of, then obviously it's gonna, not help with guest happiness there. So Breezeway helps organize all that stuff for us, and of course, dynamic pricing. I don't know how anybody does this without a dynamic pricing tool. So those are kind of the two that stand out. I'm probably forgetting multiple. I mean, we use a decent amount of tech, obviously, managing this many properties. But those are the.
Hospitable is the main hub for everything. So I think that's without Hospitable. We would definitely be lost.
Right. Yeah. And what's cool about you guys is you're consistently developing and adding features. The rental agreement is a good example. That was a chore to keep up on who was signing and sending guest messages to make sure they sign. But now that Hospitable can kind of take that out of our hands, and there's still a little bit of monitoring that, of course, if guests have questions, but just that alone, that technology that you guys, or the feature that you've added has definitely helped. So
nice. Awesome. Great to hear it. Thank you. And so maybe a bit more about your business and kind of understanding how you're growing. So are you focused on, bringing on more properties? And if so, how are you going about that? How are you kind of finding more people to co-host with?
Yeah, so there's a few different funnels there for us. One great funnel has been the Airbnb co-host program. So we kind of were early in on that. So we have developed a good relationship on that, or a good, review score and stuff on that platform. So we get a decent amount of, owners that come to us, some asking just to help, get listings up. Some want us to just create things for them and kind of get them going. Some come to us and say, hey, we don't want to, do the management at all. Can you do everything for us? That, and then of course, word of mouth. So, we haven't really put a whole lot into marketing spend. So, I think a lot of it has just been really word of mouth, the Airbnb co-host platform, just kind of taking care of our customers. So we try to do things a little bit different. Typically, when a property owner signs on with a property manager, co-host, whomever, they have very little visibility into what's happening at the property. Even with maintenance most of the time, but even guest communication, a lot of the times they're just receiving that check at the end of the month for, rental income, and they really have no idea, what the review score is other than looking like at the Airbnb profile or the Vrbo profile or listings. But we try to give owners full visibility into that. So, we're not afraid to allow our owners to see all the messages going through. We want them to know that we're responding, quickly in a short amount of time. And, we're upholding that guest experience and happiness. So, but yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your question of, we're continuing to add properties. Do we want to add 250 properties? Probably not. We want to add the properties, of owners that are motivated to take care of. They are, responsive, and properties that are of good quality. I don't think we would take something on that clearly needs a good amount of work and that wouldn't provide that good guest experience. So that's kind of where our head's at when we take on properties. We're not just going to take on anything that comes to us. There's kind of a, vetting process that goes into it. But
yeah, I think at this point in our business and our growth journey, we're at the point where we're being a little bit more selective in the properties that we take on, and the condition, what we think we can produce for the owner, and just being a little bit more choosy. And we don't, want to be gigantic. We kind of want to be able to maintain the relationship with the owner, and that's what we really pride ourselves on. So,
yeah, nice. So maybe tell me a bit more about what that process actually looks like. How do you kind of, go through that of deciding if it is the right property, if it is the right owner? Is it kind of getting on a call with them? Is it actually going and seeing the property yourself? Let me know on that.
Yeah, talk through that process.
Yeah, so seeing the property, for one, obviously you can look up a Zillow link, right, and look at the property and see, what it looks like from that perspective. But, you have to get in the property, right? For the properties so in Oregon, right, I mentioned we're in Florida. It's obviously not easy for us to hop on a flight and get to Oregon, the next business day. So we do have a good team in place in Oregon that can go in, look at the property, send us a report, do video walkthroughs, and basically just tell us, hey, these are the things that need work. If you're going to take it on, these are the things you should consider. But then the second step is to, hop on a call with the owner and just learn more about their goals. A huge thing we touch on is revenue and what they need to make ends meet at the property, right? We're not just going to throw a revenue number at them and say, yeah, well, you use us now, great, let's move forward. If we don't think we can hit what they expect us to hit from a, hey, I need this to keep the property afloat standpoint, then, we want to make sure they know that. So generally we want to understand their goals, again, revenue, understand, how much ownership they want of things. An example would be if an owner wants to control pricing and, not really allow us to do what needs to be done to make that property successful, then that's going to result in, not, hitting the expectations that, we set. So just, stuff like that, really just making sure those goals align and, making sure we're truly the right fit for somebody. And we learned that as we went on. I think the first property we found was on Facebook, and it was like, oh great, yeah, co-hosting, let's jump in and this guy needs a co-host, this gal needs a co-host, let's just do it. So figuring out slowly, like, hey, we need to really dive in and understand these property owners' goals and make sure we are truly a good fit. So
and through those sales calls, and I say sales calls, but through those discovery calls, we're identifying, are we truly a good fit? Can we work with this owner? Because there are red flags that we look for, and just every customer that comes to you is not always going to be a great fit. So identifying those early on is something that we strive for as well.
Yeah. And let me also add too, we don't only co-host or manage properties. So, we do have owners, like I said, on the Airbnb co-host platform come to us, and they just don't know where to start. It's like, hey, I'm going to set up an Airbnb listing. I'm going to take photos with my iPhone and throw it on, and the floodgates are going to open. So they need that help to kind of get going. So if we do come across a property that wouldn't necessarily hit kind of a minimum revenue threshold that we think, we need in order for us to take on the property, we'll offer to set them up for self-management, which includes Hospitable. So we go in, we, basically set them up with Hospitable, set up the messaging cadence, set up their pricing, basically give everything to them ready to go, show them how to use it, and then meet with them for a month after to kind of make sure everything's, flowing the way it should. So there's kind of two buckets there, the kind of full management, and then the, hey, based on, the property's revenue potential and what you want to hit from a revenue goal standpoint, it probably just makes sense for you to do it on your own, especially if you just have one property. So
nice. Okay, cool. And then, sorry to just jump back a little bit, Nicole, you kind of mentioned some red flags in kind of those discovery calls. Any of those kind of red flags you want to kind of call out? Things that you kind of, make your skin stand on end and make you kind of go, oh, alarm bells ringing?
Yeah, if an owner is not willing to, if we make suggestions on, property improvements and an owner
Yeah.
is not willing to invest in their property, that's obviously a red flag.
Mm.
Them dictating, well, this is what I like to price it at in high season, and this is what I want a minimum stay of this
Yeah.
and a minimum dollar amount of this. So the more specific they are on pricing and minimum night stay is a clear indicator that they're going to be maybe a little bit more controlling. And we really try to build that relationship with the owner and build that trust so that we can do our job. If we're having to answer to the owner every time they see a booking and they're not quite satisfied, that obviously takes away from us being able to do our job. So identifying those red flags. And then also another one is when an owner really thinks their property is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Yes, a lot of owners pour their heart and soul into it, or it's their baby. We've found that is kind of challenging as well, because then they don't necessarily want to take suggestions from you.
Yeah.
So it's a learning process. We find new red flags all the time, but yeah, we work through them and learn from them. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So I think just a couple more questions for you, and this one I normally ask at the start. So you clearly love hosting. It sounds like you love what you do. Why? What would you say is so great about being a short-term rental host?
We ask ourselves that every day, man. No, we do. We listen. If you're in the business of helping people have a good vacation, there's a rewarding aspect that comes with that. Like being in the Orlando market, people save up for probably years to come on their week-long family vacation here. So if we're able to help create a good positive experience for them and prevent them from maybe staying at a property that hasn't been taken care of, that needs all this work, and they spent all this money and they're not happy, that's rewarding for us. Then on the property owner side, helping them, for one, helping improve revenue. We have property owners that come to us that say, look, I'm not able to pay my mortgage on this property. I bought it as an investment property. What am I doing wrong? If we're able to get that owner to a point where they're at minimum paying their mortgage, but maybe even cash flowing on the property, that's huge. That we're helping that individual grow their net worth and grow their, just improve their, their properties overall. So I think for me, those are the two kind of buckets that I look at. Now, do we, obviously in every business, you're going to have the occasional guests that are not, you just can't make everybody happy. But I think the amount of guests like that versus the amount of guests we're able to help and, create a good experience for, I think is really, kind of why we love doing this. So What would you say?
I think for me, I love it when guests say, if it's a nice property and it's the off season and, obviously rates are a little bit lower in off season, but they're like, thank you. It was great to be able to stay in this nice of a property and be able to afford it. Normally we wouldn't be able to, or in off season we can, but in high season we can't. So I think that's being able to provide that is a nice rewarding thing. And then also property transformations. Sometimes we take on properties and they just need a lot of work, or it's more work than we anticipated. And just seeing it transform and, get 5-star ratings, and then people are super satisfied with it. And, so that gem that's just buried in the rubble, and then we're revealing it kind of thing. So that's rewarding to me.
Yeah.
Nice. It's a good answer. I like that. Cool. And so I think final, probably the easiest question of them all. If listeners want help with their property, they're looking for a co-host, where do they go and find out more about you and your business?
Yeah, so you can either go to our website. It's wandermorehosting.com. Our email is info@wandermorehosting.com, and you can find both of us on LinkedIn as well. So that's probably the easiest way to get us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert and Nicole.
Thanks, Miles.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode of the Hospitable Hosts podcast, please don't forget to like and share on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks.